And we are, excuse me, and we are live. It's Robert Phoenix back for another edition of the Friday FARcast. It is 11/8, and we are moments away from having Dani Katz join the show. So let me just take this moment in time to give some love to our sponsor, True Hemp Science. Of course, True Hemp Science is your one-stop shop for all things CBD related. So if you have any interest in CBD as a, not just a product, but a practice in your life, don't waste any time. Don't shop around. I guess you could shop around, but this is real. I'm going to save you a bunch of time. This is the place you need to go right here. This is the place you need to go. TrueHempScience.com, and you will find the best organically sourced CBD that is uniquely crafted in ways that other CBD products just aren't. And you can see that there's a number of different products there for different applications. We've got Dose, Lumina, Reviva, Solara. And then we have a number of really great testimonials for the products there. And these are just the featured products. So all you got to do is spend $100, type in 15MINS, and you'll get some of the products in the goodie bag, which are almost like a second order with your order, which is great. Then you're going to get $100 free shipping right there, $150 or more. That's a nice little discount. And there's always a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you don't like it after 30 days, let's say you use the product for 28 days, and you're like, hey, I'm not really feeling the product, you can still send it back. But I guarantee you probably won't. So 15MINS is your code for True Hemp Science. Go there, support the show, support Chris. It's the circle of life. All right. Speaking of circle of life, let's bring on our live wire from New Mexico, the great Dani Katz.
Hi.
Look
live wire? Moi?
Yeah. Yes, you are a live wire. Thank God.
Do what I can.
So are you channeling Marlon Brando here from the Wild Bunch, or what's your is that
I'm channeling, we have such an insane snowstorm, and I just was able to make it home like 15 minutes ago. So I pulled it together like this.
I kind of like it. Actually, more than kind of, I do like it.
Thank you. This is my favorite hat. It's a French Legionnaire's hat.
French Legionnaire's hat. I think there's a term for your fashion choice today. It's called radical chic, right? That's the term for radical chic. Yeah.
Thank you.
How you doing, Dani? It's good to see you.
I'm great. How are you, Robert?
I'm good. I'm really good. I've got my favorite co-host right here, the great Peachy.
Hi, kitty.
Yeah. So yeah, life's good. Although last night, do you have any pets, Dani?
I do not have any pets.
Okay. So I used to be I love animals, but I used to have dogs, right? And I have tried to have dogs over the years, and I just, for whatever reason, they just haven't worked out. And last night,
it's a needy.
What's that?
Dogs are high maintenance and needy, like cancers.
Well, they are, but they're very loyal too. That's the other side of them, right? They're very loyal.
But they're indiscriminately loyal. So does it even count?
Some breeds are not indiscriminately loyal. Some breeds are like very individual and family loyal.
Okay.
Right. Some are, and some are not. Some are very indiscriminately. You're absolutely right about that. Anyway, for whatever reason, I started to look at dogs last night on the internet, and I found this breed called the Vizsla, which I kind of fell in love with. It's a Hungarian hunting dog. But my better angels are telling me stay away. Just stay away for now.
From that breed or a dog in general?
In general.
That's a major commitment.
Yeah, I mean, when I had a dog when I think got Cosmo when I was 26,
Mhm.
and he passed away when I was 40. So I had him for 14 years. He was an Aquarian dog. And let me tell you, astrology in dogs is real. Astrology in pets is real.
Mhm.
They take on their signs. And he was a total Aquarian dog. And one of the things that I had read about Aquarian dogs is that they will turn their heads and look at you like they're trying to understand you, right? And I watched him, and he would do that shit. You know, he'd go, what are you trying to sell me here? You know, and he was so fiercely independent as a dog. Like he'd go off and do his own thing, right? And sometimes, I couldn't really stop him, right?
I feel like an Aquarian dog is like a cat that you have to bathe.
Luckily for my dog, he loved the water. So the bathing part, the only time I really had to bathe him was when he got older. And, you have to do that with an older dog. And then one time we were on a ring mountain in Sausalito at night, and he got hit by a skunk, and I had to experience a little skunk thing.
Yeah.
So
tomato juice, Dawn.
The tomato juice thing is kind of an urban legend, honestly.
Okay.
Like if you have an animal that's skunked, you better get a fucking case of tomato juice, okay?
Right.
Because it's not bad. The Dawn part was the killer app. Like Dawn is a killer app for just about anything, apparently. So
I feel like cats are the Aquarian spirit animal. I feel like they're kind of interchangeable, being an Aquarius, being a cat. Also, avoidant attachment.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. They're very Aquarian because they're both personal and impersonal at the same time. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway,
so they didn't kill Kamala. I'm shocked. That was what I really thought they were going to do. I thought they were going to kill Kamala, pull her at the last minute, and shove in Hillary. I can't believe they took her all the way.
Oh, I knew they would.
Really? Because they wanted Trump to win?
Well, no, I don't really think so. I think they painted themselves in a corner, and so you have to understand how powerful the Bay Area political mafia is. They're very, very powerful.
Right.
So you had forces like Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom, and there's a lot of really big money that comes out of California, not just from Silicon Valley, but from like the Gettys and all these people that live in Pacific. Like, for instance, Daniel Lurie just got elected mayor of San Francisco. He's the stepson of Peter Haas Jr., who is the heir to the Levi's fortune. And they spent $15 million on his election to get to become elected mayor of San Francisco. And he defeated the DEI choice, London Breed, who was a Willie Brown protege. So that just goes to show you how much money comes out of that area. Of course, you have Dianne Feinstein, who was there before, right? So it's just a mafia. It's a political mafia. And that money and that influence was heavily invested in Kamala Harris, right? From the beginning, from the jump, they groomed her. And then once she got attached to the Biden ticket.
Well, I have to stop you there, though, because if they groomed her and put so much money into her, why couldn't she string together an intelligible sentence, a single policy? Like, that's where I don't understand. Like, with all that investment,
they've backed themselves into a corner ideologically, right? The left has doubled down, tripled down, and quadrupled down on matters that people are honestly tired of. They're like fringe issues. The one issue that she had a plank to stand on was abortion and women's rights and bodily autonomy, but she canceled that out by calling Trump Hitler all the time, right? So if she had worked that angle specifically without going into demonization, she might have had a better chance. Now, if you pay attention to Harris, she's not bad when she's on script, right? If you write a speech for her, or she's in her equity and DEI lane, and we don't always start in the same place, but we're going to finish it. She's great at that. Like that. No,
I feel like she's adequate. I feel like she's
great
okay.
great compared to the other stuff. Okay.
Right.
All right. So we're just being kind of subjective here.
Right.
When you get her off that script, she has no ability to be an original thinker. She has no ability to answer a question that is not like in the frame set,
Right.
Of the ideology. And
Right.
unfortunately, she is a poster child for the ideology. Like there's no wiggle room outside of that. Like that's the box that they have painted their political position in. And they've doubled down, tripled down, and quadrupled down. You can see the results, right?
This is what annoys me as a woman, because all their ideology props up like slutty whores with no actual intelligence or merit to back them up, and it gives women an even worse name, right?
I agree. I totally agree. And again, this thing, like, he just doesn't appear out of nowhere. Like, these people are chosen, they're groomed, right? They're passed along from station to station to station, and then they show up. So if they want better female candidates, they better do a better job of grooming them and finding better candidates, right? Because that's how all this starts. I mean, even somebody like most people don't know who she is, Tammy Duckworth. Right. Tammy Duckworth is a former vet. She's sort of like the mixed race version of Tulsi Gabbard, although some people would say Tulsi Gabbard's mixed race.
Right.
And she comes out of Illinois, and I think she's also kind of an amputee, right? Tammy Duckworth. She's got all the credentials.
Those are credentials.
Like, the credentials are she's former service, right? Former service.
Okay, that's legit.
Former service. She's a minority. Now, come on, it's a credential. It may
it?
not be.
I mean, in reality, not in like crazy DEI land.
It is a false credential, but it is a credential, right? She's also an amputee. Believe it or not, like in this world, I don't know how. Do you watch mainstream TV at all?
No.
Okay. Well, let me give you a little bit. I don't really watch it except when I watch some stupid ass sports shit that is completely fixed. But when I do watch it, I'll see commercials. And the amount of disabled people that are in commercials now is like really interesting. Right. So the disabled people are now part of this conversation.
So they're part of the rainbow mafia. It's like LB.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like we have to be so inclusive. In fact, not only that, but they're also making commercials. And I don't really have a problem with this, but it just feels so manipulative that they're like putting people in commercials with like Down syndrome and stuff. Oh, and yeah, and there was this one commercial. I swear to God, it was almost like, is this a fucking Saturday Night Live skit?
Right.
And it was this, God bless her, she's a woman and she's probably on the most functional phase of being disabled. And she's talking about what a great life she has at one of these, fast food restaurants where, she has a purpose and work. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on here? Right. Like, this is kind of where everything has shifted in some ways. And, and I don't really have a problem with it because it's a part of our society that doesn't really get a whole lot of representation. But that said, you could throw Tammy Duckworth into that bucket too. Right now, she's disabled. But guess what? She's a fucking idiot. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. I mean, people are, I remember when they were propping her up about 4 years ago. I mean, well, who is this Tammy Duckworth? And I started to listen to her. I'm like, my God, this person's fucking stupid. Right? I'm sorry, but she's just stupid. So this is what we've come down to with identity politics. And they've gone all in. They painted themselves into a box. And Kamala became the poster girl for that.
It's just odd to me that there was no one else who they chose, and now they're blaming it on like, well, everyone's sexist or everyone's racist. It's like, no, you chose an idiot. Was there no one in your party who was actually qualified for this job to go up against Trump?
So here's what I think. you got to go all the way back to the Democratic primary
Mhm.
in 2020, where Joe Biden is just sucking, exhaust fumes. He's not doing well at all, right? And I think what happened, and their chosen candidate, Kamala Harris, people forget, right, that she was part of that process, and she got shivved by Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi took a crowbar to her knees, took her
It
out.
was a thing of beauty, just a total thing. I've watched that multiple times, by the way.
It's so good.
It's really good. So that was their plan.
Choice, like it was very calculated. Like I'm going to destroy her.
That's it.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard was like a fucking hitman.
Yeah.
Right. And then that was it. She was done. But she did her job, right? And they really wanted Harris. They really wanted Harris to get that nomination, right? They wanted Harris to come in on the heels of Hillary and say, okay, well, this didn't work with the angry old white witch. Let's spice it up. Let's get a little flavor, right? Let's put a little cream in the coffee, and let's bring Kamala into this. But she was woefully. And if you go back to that first debate, what does Harris do? She goes right after Joe Biden, right? The first debate they have, she just turns to her right and basically calls him a racist. And, and if it wasn't for busing, which you were against, there was a little girl in Berkeley, California who wouldn't be here today, right? Like that was her line. She went right after Biden. She knew that of everybody on the panel, that Biden was the big dog. And it was like, when I've never been to prison, and thank God, hopefully I never will. But there's this idea that, if you're going to have to get into a fight, you go after the big dog on you. And then it's like, oh, shit, we're not going to mess with it, right? So she went after the big dog. And then she thought she had this thing in the bag. And of course, what happens? Tulsi comes along, shivs her. But they didn't give up, right? They didn't give up. And here's what I think they did. They went to Biden and they said, you're going to be the candidate. All these people are going to step aside, which they all did. I think it was after who was the guy? Was it John Lewis? What's the guy's name? The guy from South Carolina, North Carolina, whatever. The guy that marched with Martin Luther King. Okay. Right. And he gave Biden the papal blessing. Right. It was right after that. They all start to step down. So I think the deal was, you're going to be the guy. Terms and conditions, you got to bring Harris along with you. Right. Of course. That was the deal. Yeah. And so he won the election, asterisk. And I think the plan always was for Harris to become president while he was president. That was the plan. You mean like the forward-facing puppet being run by the Obama camp, or like someone who actually had a say in governance? I think the plan was that now, Joe Biden may not have known the plan, but the plan was... Joe Biden doesn't even know his name. Probably about halfway through the Biden administration, Harris would become president. That was the plan. And even astrologically, when you look at her chart, there was a moment in February of 2023 where it was peak Harris. That was the time. Mm-hmm. And I really thought that it was either going to be some kind of a health crisis, or they were going to make a deal and Biden was going to step down and she would have been president, right? And Gerald Ford even talked about this in a video a long time ago. And what they underestimated was not Joe Biden. They underestimated Jill Biden. Yeah. That's who they underestimated. And so I have this theory, right, that Jill Biden was supremely pissed that Kamala Harris was there the entire 4 years, because she had to share her White House moment right? Being the first lady
Mm.
with Kamala Harris being this other woman. Like it was like a bizarre love triangle. And she didn't like it. She didn't like the partnership. And she also didn't like the fact that they were being muscled. And there was a lot of muscling going on in the background. And it was coming from Obama. It was coming from Pelosi. It was coming from the West Coast mafia, right? They were, and it got so bad at a certain point that Ron Klain, who was Biden's right-hand man, political operative, had been with Biden for years, and he was the chief of staff at the White House. He had to step down because there was so much rancor going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And Biden is a Scorpio, and he dug his heels in, right? And the Biden family dug their heels in. They're like, you're not going to get Joe out of here. Until finally it came down to the 11th hour. And, the rumor is, and I don't think the rumor is a falsehood, Pelosi and Harris and Obama said, look, you're going to step down or we're going to 25th Amendment you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they had all the prima facie evidence that they needed with the debate, right? They sent him out there, and that was, talk about a political hit job, right? It was like, oh, he's so pathetic. He's so senile. Well, where the fuck were you for the last 3 years?
Right.
Prior to that, oh, he's doing a great job. Best president ever. And now all of a sudden, oh, we got to get him out of there. So the Bidens, of course, Joe being a whatever's left of him, consummate insider, and he's got Jill, and then Jill had her man husband, right? And they cut a deal, and the deal was that they're going to get a bunch of money, they're going to get a Biden library, and he's going to be completely exonerated of everything. And that was the deal. That was the deal that was made. And finally, they were able to get Harris into the pilot seat, right? But the timing was off and wrong. She had a sprint to the finish line, and it started off with happy joy, turn the page.
I'm a joy warrior.
And then by the end, like she's channeling the fucking fury of the century, right? It was dark. It was very dark.
So dark and like angry and like punitive. And I was like, if this is how she's lobbying to be in the position, how badly is she going to behave were she to get there? It reminds me of, I don't know if you've paid attention to Governor Lujan Grisham here in New Mexico, but she has that same style. Like, I hate you, you little plebes, and I'm going to boss you around like a psychopath.
Yeah. So I don't know her personally, but I've seen some of the things she's done in the state, which is so tone deaf, right? It's so tone deaf. It's like, I don't give a fuck about any of you.
Exactly.
I'm just going to be, the queen of spades, and I'm just going to tell you all what the fuck to do, and you're going to bow down and listen to me. And I think Harris, what she reminded me of at the end?
Mommy dearest?
Well, there's that, but she reminded me of like, Ingsoc, Big Brother, like, the really dark version of the leadership of 1984, right? That's what she reminded me of. It was scary. It was really scary.
Exactly. That's the thing where it's like, well, you're trying to win the hearts and minds of the American people. Why would you choose this strategy where you're just so angry all the time? And it seemed like they were just choosing a different strategy every other day. Like, first it was joyful warrior. Then it was like, be as woke as possible. Then it was like TDS syndrome, like to the finish line. It was like it was just all over the place. And then it was just her like berating the American people and like shaming everyone into voting for her.
Well, if you go back and kind of reconstruct the Clinton versus Trump race, Hillary did the same thing.
This is my thing about the females who they prop up. Hillary, Lujan Grisham, Harris, they're all, I don't know if I'm allowed to use the word CUNT on your show, but
you can use the word,
they're
cunt.
cunty. They
They're
have
cunty.
a cunt strategy, and it gives women a bad name. The same way trans is an op against women, propping up these particular women is another affront to women. And there's no feminine leadership represented in any of them on any level. It's gross. It's offensive to me as a woman.
So the question here that I want to throw out to you is, do you think that because they're women that they have to drink from the overcompensation mug? Is that really what's going on here?
I don't think they have to, because I think they are, but it's, this is what I write about in my book, The Language of Betterarchy, is like having someone in power with a vagina who's doubling down on the masculine shadow is not a shift, is not progress. Tulsi, for all her flaws, her flip-floppiness, her ambition, she at least carries herself with some feminine grace. Like, I actually feel more balance in her. Catherine Austin Fitts, not that she's running for everything, but I feel like she holds that strong, empowered feminine and doesn't have to delve into like cunty warhawk the way Hillary did, so I don't think they have to. I think it might be a generational thing in bringing in these like Gen X women who actually, or not Gen X, but boomers who haven't actually healed their own internal masculine feminine. So then they overcompensate. But to try to brand that to the public as progress, as feminine leadership, is a lie, and it's gross.
Well, the boomers, for the most part, were right there for second wave feminism, right? Like they were there in the 60s when, it was Hear Me Roar, I Am Woman. And, and again, I think the strategy around all that is you got to be more of a man than a man.
But that's a Tavistock op. Like, that's
I agree with you. I agree with you.
I
agree with you. The Rockefellers were behind it. It was all part of the MK Ultra, movie of the 1960s, right? But I feel like we're starting to move beyond that, because when I look at the political theater, I always go back to Saul Alinsky in Rules for Radicals. And one of the things that is a kind of, one of the commandments of Rules for Radicals is when an action loses its energy, you have to abandon it, right? Because then it becomes counterproductive. Their biggest faux pas is that they did not change the action.
Right.
They stayed with the action for too long, and then the action became inverted and worked against them.
100%. Totally. But I think, I do think they're overcompensating, but I think it just pushes the idea of women's empowerment back even more and gives women a bad name, which I think is part of it. Like, I think this is part of their scam, because they keep choosing these horrible, masculinized, angry women instead of choosing true embodiments of feminine leadership that can dip into the masculine, that can dip into the feminine. They're not choosing any of those people. They choose these hysterical lunatics.
Yeah. So Bill Clinton, when Hillary was running, pulled Hillary aside and said, "Hey, look, you're being too hard on men." And he was right. He was absolutely right. And if Harris and her team had been reasonably astute, she would have been a bit more inclusive with men, right? She would have been even by just a few degrees, she would have been a bit more inclusive with men.
Well, she had the white dudes for Harris. That embarrassment.
Total embarrassment.
Ugh.
So here's what I think, and I'd love your take on this. They thought that just based on the numbers, if you look at the numbers of women, there's more women than men, right? There's more women than men, even at a voting age level, more women than men. Women tend to be more liberal, more soft in their politics. And they thought all we have to do is get the majority of the female vote, and we got this. right? We got this. And boy, were they fucking wrong.
Well, again, it's just underestimating women, as they always do, as though we don't have a brain in our heads and we're not going to vote for policy, or leadership capabilities, especially given the tenuous place we're now holding internationally. Like, can you imagine Harris walking into a meeting with Putin or Netanyahu? That would be an embarrassment. So they think that we're stupid and we're just going to vote for vaginas because we don't have brains or critical thinking. That's insane. Like, are you going to choose your heart surgeon based on their gender versus their qualifications?
All right. So I'm going to throw this out there. I think inherently women want to feel safe and secure. Yeah. That's why women often will marry for money, right? They want to feel safe and secure. And if you're a woman, which is to your point, really, if you're a woman and you're looking at Kamala Harris, do you really feel safe and secure with her?
No, not on any level. And that was where they made the wrong choice, and again, it's just thinking that every woman is going to play into this like ideological woke game instead of actually caring about the well-being of Americans and our country.
It's incredibly insulting on so many levels. Yeah, really insulting. Not just for women, but Americans in general. Like, what do you take us for, fucking dupes?
Right.
Come on. Yeah.
Right. And then the second she loses, they're like, it's because everyone's sexist and racist. Okay, this is what's annoying me about how it's going down now. There's no self-reflection. I'm not seeing any inquiry among the Dems as to like, wow, how did we get it so wrong? Why don't we reach out to our fellow Americans to see what they're thinking and what we can learn from this? But again, they're doubling down on the demonization. And the stupid plebes are just too racist and stupid. There's just like no self-awareness. I saw Moby post this video on how bad everything went. And it's like, you're so out of touch in your like golden Hollywood Hills castle, of where you're surrounded by liberal yes men. And like, why isn't it shaking you that you guys have had it this wrong and that you're really this clueless as to where America is at?
Moby is just such a lost cause. My God.
I know.
Such a lost cause. I want to show you something. A friend of mine sent this to me, and when I read this, I was absolutely stunned. And I did a show on it on I guess it was Wednesday. I think it was Thursday, Wednesday. No, it was yesterday. So let me show this to you. I'm just going to highlight a few snippets. And to your point, the lack of self-reflection is stunning.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know who this woman, Heather Cox Richardson, is.
No.
She's got a pretty big Substack. Letters from an American. And when I went through this, I deconstructed this thing, and it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It's embarrassing. Let me just show you this one piece here. First of all, she says Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, we'll get to him. Offered a message of unity. Did they really offer a message of unity? Really?
Never. It was such hateful, divisive, blaming rhetoric.
A message of unity they would have looked right into the camera and said, listen, for all of you people who are tired and weary of the candidate that we're running against, we want you to come in, right? Come in from the cold. We know that, there's been some issues, ideological issues between both parties. We're going to work to close that gap, right? You have our word. We're going to work to close that gap, and we're going to make ourselves available to you. And they should have gone out and done as many interviews on conservative platforms as possible. Like, that would have been a winning strategy. That's unity.
That's unity.
Their version of unity is, like, oh, we're going to force everybody to just be a part of our party. And anyway, so then it goes on to say, and this is mind blowing here. She says, offered a message of unity, the expansion of the economic policies that made the U.S. economy the strongest in the world in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, and the creation of an opportunity economy that echoed many of the policies Republicans used to embrace. Trump vowed to take revenge on his enemies to return the country to the neoliberal policies. When the fuck was Trump ever a neoliberal?
What?
Like, get your classifications right.
Wow.
And then she says, when he took office, Biden acknowledged that democracy was in danger around the globe as authoritarians like Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's President Xi Jinping maintained that democracy was obsolete. When did Biden ever have a crossword about Xi Jinping? Never.
Yeah.
Never.
No.
Now this paragraph right here blows my mind. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who overturned democracy in his own country, explained the historical liberal democracy in the United States weakens a nation because the equality it champions means treating immigrants, LGBTQ plus individuals, and women as equal to men, thus ending traditionally patriarchal society. And then she goes on to say, and this is mind-blowing, Orban's model of minority rule promises a return to a white-dominated, religiously based society, and he has pushed his vision by eliminating. Have you looked at the demographics of Hungary, lady? 87% of them are white.
Right.
Like, and they're white Hungarians. That's not including the Germans that are. I mean, like, this bullshit is toxic. It is so toxic. And this is like a day after the election. To your point, there's no reflection. There's no reflection.
No, there's not even a moment of pause. It's just immediately blaming. I've had a couple conversations, and I've been doing my best to just stay super neutral, right? Just like, okay, this happened. That's fine. The people that I've spoken to who are freaked out with TDS that this has happened, all they do is yell in my ear about all the terrible things are going to happen. There's no exchange. They don't ask me what I think. They don't want to know. They just want to scream and spew their worst case scenarios. And they have nothing to do with source material, with policies. It's just this fear mongering of like, these Nazis are destroying democracy. And it's like totally unhinged craziness. And there's no opportunity for them to receive any information that would counter their indoctrination.
Okay, so let's go a few levels deeper here. Let's get into some like neuroscience. What is going on in their brains? Like,
I think their brains are gone.
So what are they? They're
not working. They're like, I don't know how mind control works, but it's like it's melted into a soup of some sort.
There's a part of their brain that has been completely switched off.
Yes.
And they're incapable of accessing that part of their brain.
Correct. Do you think it's been hijacked like by the forced injections? Was it gone before? Like, I'm always curious of the mechanics of, just like you asked, like, how have they co-opted this part of the brain? Have they melted it? Has it vaporized? Is it hijacked? Are they holding it in some underground bunker?
Well, I think you're a really good person to have this conversation with, because your stock and trade is words and language. And everybody knows about neuro-linguistic programming.
Yep.
And how if you're really good at neuro-linguistic programming, like, you can get a lot done.
Yep.
So if we look at things like repetition of language, repetition of image, and then you fuse emotion into that, and emotion is really the key factor here. Over time, what does that do to the patterning of the brain? It's got to have an impact on the patterning of the brain.
But it's not working on you and me.
That's true.
Anyone listening, so there's some sort of dividing line, because we're hearing that same repetition and we're like, that's crazy. You know, like I've had people tell me to my face, all Trump supporters are racist. And I say, I voted for Trump. I didn't vote in this past election, but I voted for him before. And they say, and then they continue. And I'm like, I'm presenting you with evidence that what you're saying is not true. And they say, and then they just barrel over it. These people all know people in their lives who support Trump, who they have to know are not racist, hate-mongering Nazis.
Okay, so I think the fundamental difference that at a superficial level that I can put my finger on is that you and I are individuals. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that we're talking about are not individuals.
So what are they? They're just like nodes of group mind?
They're part of a group mind. Mm-hmm. And there's got to be something genetically that is predisposed towards people either being more on the individualistic side or more on the group mind side. And it has to be, I think, probably primal, right? Like if you're an individual, you probably have something deep in your gene pool that goes all the way back to a period of time where you had to go out and slay a mastodon, or you had to, stay up, throughout the night and, keep watch over the fire and make sure other people didn't come steal your mastodon meat, right? I feel like that there's a part of us that is connected into that kind of genetic code. Meanwhile, hold
on. Is everyone in your family on your same page?
Well, I don't have anybody left in my family.
The only people I've left in my family all have TDS. Like they're certainly not independent thinkers.
Genes are sometimes they skip generations, mm-hmm. right? I don't think it's 1-to-1 all the time, right? So, and I think that again, I'm just going on sort of this genetic code that there are other people who at a certain time probably became linked in to what we would call the agrarian society, right? Where, it was groups of people that were either enslaved and had to grow food for the people that ruled over them, or they were part of some more kind of communalistic experience. And they've got that kind of function in their genetics. So they predominantly feel safer and more attuned to this group consciousness. And it's very difficult for them to step away from the group and have the experience of being an individual. That's the only thing I could think of, is that this thing is encoded in us. And if you look at the numbers, if you were to play the numbers game, right, and you were to go back and see when humans were herded, an event essentially put into sort of these agrarian cultures and agrarian civilizations, there's much greater numbers than nomadic people and hunter-gatherers, mm-hmm. right? The numbers just are much greater. So you're going to have a larger number of people, I think, that are just genetically predominantly predisposed towards that affiliation versus probably about maybe 20% of the population, maybe a little bit more, that is going to be more individual because they're more attuned to survival and hyperattenuation and looking after themselves, right? I don't have any basis for any of this scientifically. It just feels like that's what we evolved from.
It's very odd because the fear and hysteria, mind control running the people we're referencing, it runs completely counter to their lived everyday experience of reality.
Right?
That's what's so, it's like, how is, like, none of this is happening in your actual lived world. And I spoke with my uncle briefly the day after the election, and he was just going off about Trump. And I was doing my best to stay really neutral and be like, well, there are many branches of government. We have checks and balances. We'll see how it shakes out. And he wasn't getting off of it. And I said, well, how was your life the first time Trump was president, it was a living hell. And I'm like, it wasn't. I knew, like, it absolutely wasn't a living hell. Like, that's insane. Like, what is going on there? Do you think this goes into like people with alien DNA, people who might not actually be human, people who are like NPCs or holograms? Like, it's very hard to understand.
Well, the NPC thing is interesting, right? But again, it goes into this idea of like the group mind in the collective, and kind of an enclave of people that get up every day and and go work in the fields and pick the beans or the wheat or whatever for Pharaoh or whoever is running the thing, right? I think that the NPC thing kind of comes out of that. The alien thing is an interesting question. I think the alien thing probably goes up a couple levels, right? I think the alien thing is more part of the control group, right? Because now you're talking about people who don't have any real kind of like, I'm here. Let me ask you a question. If you sat down with your uncle and got him out of TDS world, right, and had a conversation about suffering, compassion, pick something that he would align with, right? You could probably have a conversation with him about that, right? Am I right?
I want you to be right. And I have other friends with milder cases of TDS where that would be the case. Yeah. But he's totally co-opted. To be honest, he and I got into a fight about Trump in 2017 and haven't really had a relationship since. He's been totally taken by it. But also, to be fair, he's a pretty weak character. I have other friends who hate Trump, think Trump supporters are Nazis, and we can still have conversations about other things and still connect. He's one of the extreme cases where he actually cannot.
Right. So I guess my point is that people maybe like your friends that you're talking about, you can still have a conversation about maybe genocide in Israel, right?
Right.
You go up a couple levels, you deal with people who have maybe like alien or vampire DNA, and they don't even give a shit. Right.
So what does that mean? They're just like sociopaths or psychopaths, and they're
yes.
Shapiro, like, I'm glad they're all dying.
Well, they don't really care. It's not even that they're glad. Like they don't care. I think they see life in a very clinical way. Right. And it's just a numbers game.
Right. And they're just out. They just want to protect their clan, their bloodline. They just want for themselves.
That's right.
So I see that as like lower levels in the spiral dynamics scale, which could correspond to alien DNA, but just like a lower level of evolution where they're just looking out for themselves.
Well, I think that's a really good point, because now what you bring into the equation is malevolence. And then that would then separate the next group, like that there would actually be a malevolent motive versus just we're going to just circle the wagons and make a lot of money and fuck everybody else.
Right.
That's a really good point. One of the things that you mentioned, I don't know where I saw it, maybe it was with Emily or on Twitter, but you brought up this book called The Right Use of Will.
Yeah. I love it.
And that was one of those books when did it come out? The 80s? It was in the 80s, I think.
Yeah.
It was one of those books that just really grabbed me.
Yeah.
Now, the books after it, I wasn't really that drawn to.
It was harder to get through. I mean, but that first one like packed a punch.
What can you tell people about that book and give a brief synopsis around some of the ideas that are in that book?
Sure. So it's a series channeled by Sianda Rohan, and it's allegedly channeled from God himself, not like a group of galactic alien, angels or whatnot. And so the basic gist of the series is like God created the mother and the father of manifestation, and they have all their neurotic, psycho-emotional bullshit. And we as humans are playing out their unresolved shit. Very kind of as above, so below. What really, grabbed me about it was proper, like third chakra use, proper use of will in this realm, in like this no nonsense way, the right way to use our authority, the right way to use our agency. And that shifted a lot of things for me in terms of just how I operate, and like not taking responsibility for other people's triggers or hurt feelings. Just, we have to take responsibility for ourselves. It's never, ever okay to impose our will upon anyone else. Those were the main pieces for me.
The thing that really got me was I don't know if you call it the creation story, but at the beginning of the book, where Earth is kind of like this slightly Edenic place, right? And everybody is sweet, and it's kind of like Hobbitville, right?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, this magician shows up, right? This wizard shows up and starts to do things that are shocking to the relatively naive and innocent inhabitants of creation.
Yep.
And when I read those passages, it really hit me. Like, I got it, right? I really got it. And I think what does it do? He eats one of them. Isn't that one of the parts of the shocking like incidents? Like, he eats one of them in front of them, right? And it's like, holy fuck! Like, this is what happens. This is what they do, right?
If I may, the gist of that is that's God's denial of his own psycho-emotional bullshit is what creates the dark. All this darkness is coming out of denial.
Right. That is a big part of it. It's been a long time since I read that book, but that part really grabbed me, because if you look at sort of like where we are now, it's almost like that's a psychological tactic that's used, and they use it to freeze people and immobilize people. And like, if that rendering of like the fall, we'll call it the fall, if that rendering of the fall is correct, then the transference of it into present day time is still here, and it's still happening.
Of course. And I think, it's for all of us to take responsibility for on an individual level. None of us are off the hook. I'm still working on my own denials, taking responsibility for my stuff. But I think we see it blown up in an exaggerated way in the Democratic Party that is accusing everyone else of being hateful and divisive, when the most hate and the most division that I see from my limited perspective is coming out of their camp. And that the largesse of their denial is creating so much toxicity. And
yes,
again, all of our denial, because it's happening on so many levels, but it's really pronounced there when they're trying to pull this unity party stuff, when they're the ones demonizing everyone who's not on their page. It's like the quintessential example of that denial gone cuckoo.
Yeah. And again, that piece that I brought up has been viewed by thousands and thousands of people. And if you go through the comments, they'll all say, thank you. Oh, thank you for this. I'm so glad you're here. All the bullshit, right? And what is that doing? Right? It's fucking dangerous. It's dangerous. It's keeping these lies and illusions and denial, to your point, alive. And it makes all these people completely dysfunctional on an interpersonal level. And let's just cut to the chase. On a cultural and societal level, it becomes absolutely dangerous.
It's super dangerous. And I kind of forgot about this part, because even though I opted out of this particular election, I live in a Dominion state. Like, it's pointless here. It's so corrupt. But of course, I was happy when Trump won. And then the next couple of days, I realized, oh, wait, do we have to deal with this like woke mob hysteria for the next 4 years? I forgot about this. Like, this is a serious pox upon our country. We really do need to do something to help course correct. Like I had posted something the day after the election saying, hey, the first time Trump won, I didn't get it. I wrote in Bernie because I was under that mind control. I reached out to a friend who I knew voted for him and said, explain this to me. Please help me understand why you're excited about this, why this is a good thing, the policies, et cetera, et cetera. And so many people attack me for propping up fascism and propping up racism, and I'm unfollowing you. And I'm like, wow, like I just proposed neutrality and inquiry to expand our perspective. I can't imagine the amount of hate I would have gotten if I was like, yay, Trump.
Oh my God.
Right? I mean, I was asking people when people who are like, I'm canceling my subscription to the Washington Post and I'm so angry and I'm canceling Amazon. I'm like, what would you have done if they had actually endorsed Trump? Like they chose to not endorse anyone and you're having a freak out. What would you have done if they endorsed Trump? Would you burn down the Washington Post?
Yeah, you know, I had a moment, I think yesterday, where for a brief moment, I thought about what would it be like to live inside the brain of one of these people for a day. It would have to be a living hell, right? They are in hell.
Oh yeah.
There's no other way to describe it or define it. And then what are they going to do? Well, they're going to make life hell for the rest of us, right? That's that. And yesterday I was talking about this, and it may sound like hyperbole, but when Trump won in 2016, you know, I was living in Austin, which is, you know, pretty progressive, and I would go into restaurants, and sometimes not really fancy restaurants, like sports bars or whatever, and they have tables, and so they'd have young people, you know, that would seat you and stuff. I can't tell you how many shitty looks I got from like the hostesses when I would walk into one of these places. Like
were you wearing like MAGA stuff?
No. I've never worn anything MAGA. Like, hey, if you want to wear it, fine. You know, I don't have a problem with that. But no, I was just me. And then I'm getting these side-eyed looks, right? And this is in 2016. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, where are we now? Like, where are we now? And one of the things that I said, and I know this may sound paranoid, but if you are going to be in a public space, especially in a restaurant, you need to pay very close attention to your surroundings and maybe even where you're eating, because I have no doubt that there are people who will surreptitiously try to get back at somebody who fits a profile. That profile is getting thinner and thinner, by the way.
Yeah.
Right. That totally. and you know, spit in your food, you know, whatever, right? Like I feel like there's such a high degree of passive aggression because there's no other way that these people can work things out. They will passively aggressive take it out on people. So, you know, and how do you function in a society like that? I mean, it's just low trust. It's just terrible.
I feel like right now, and this is just in my perspective, what we're being called to do is rise above and speak to the potential in people to remember their humanity and stay at that level, because I don't want to go through another 4 years of this division and like backbiting among my fellow humans just because we voted differently. It's stupid. And I feel like it's on us to raise that bar because we have more access to our critical thinking. We have more access to some emotional intelligence, given that we haven't fallen for the mind control. And I don't see any other way around it right now. Otherwise, we're just meeting the aggression, the conflict with more aggression and conflict. And I don't think that's going to go well. Plus, it's not fun.
Well, given the state of people's brains and genetic switches that we just talked about, that's going to be a real challenge.
I mean, I had a woman attack me in the locker room of the gym the day after the election. And I had a feeling it was about the election because she was just spewing. And she started screaming at me in the showers. I've been a member here for 20 years and I've never had anyone treat me so rudely. I've never seen this woman in my life. So I'm taking my shower and I hear her just shit talking me to the other women. I come out of the shower and I said, I'm so sorry that you feel that way. And I'm so sorry if I've offended you. You know, just for my edification, please let me know what I've done just so I can make the adjustments. She wouldn't even make eye contact and she starts spewing some stuff. And I'm like, that wasn't me. Like, I've honestly never seen you before. And she couldn't back down. She held on to it. But I was like, I felt I just need to keep taking the high road, take the high road, take the high road, take the high road. So there's nothing that they can, that's pushing back on them. So at some point, they're going to have to face themselves if we're not adding to it.
I totally agree with that. I mean, it takes a huge amount of patience and fortitude and, you know, to coin an old phrase, you know, holding space, right? Like I think you're right. I've had experiences like that in my life where I've done that and I've seen people shift. So
Right.
it's not impossible. So I'll back you up on that.
I mean, I feel like it's an incredible opportunity as the past 4, 8, 10 years have been to raise our emotional intelligence, to quantum leap our own awakening, evolution, self-mastery, because they're not going to do it. And I don't want to do an us them thing. I'm just being really realistic. Under the extent of mind control that they're under, I don't see those people having the capacity to do it, but it's a great opportunity for us to do it.
Right. All right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's what Joe Rogan said. You know, Rogan said, "Hey, look, all right, Trump, here's your chance to unify people." Right. I think Trump's challenge is to do two things simultaneously. He has to unify people, and from a bureaucratic position, he has to eliminate the blob, right? He has to get rid of the blob. He has to cut these, these heads off, right? That has to cut these heads off so that the blob can't continue to feed the masses their bullshit.
Agreed. And did you hear Bannon's speech?
I did.
I love Bannon anyway, but I was like, yeah, there has to be deep punitive justice, because what's happened, it's the same as the whole Maoist agenda. Let the kids tell the adults what they're going to do and give them no supervision. And that's what we've done with these so-called adult children. And there needs to be major smackdowns. Like, I want the Biden administration in prison or hung. Like, I want deep, steep, extreme justice so that they know that we're not having this. Now it's time to act like adults, and this isn't going to work anymore.
I agree with you, and I'm a Bannon fan as well. Right? I think like Bannon Bannon is fucking old school. Mm-hmm. Right? Bannon is medieval. He understands the dynamics of power, and he understands the dynamics, not just of power, but of threat. Right? Like, if I cross this line, there's a price to pay.
Exactly.
And that line has been eradicated.
And we need those lines brought back.
Yeah.
Did you see American Dharma? The Bannon documentary that Errol Morris did?
No.
It is fantastic. So I don't know if you're an Errol Morris fan.
Errol Morris?
Yes.
Oh yeah, the guy who did Gates of Heaven.
Yes, which
I love that.
God, that documentary was so good.
It's amazing.
So so the whole documentary is about Steve Bannon.
Right.
And you can tell that Steve Bannon is like happy to be included. And there's a moment in the documentary where Errol Morris says, like, I'm terrified of you. And it's such brilliant filmmaking. You could see on Steve Bannon's face where he realizes, oh, this whole thing's been a setup and this guy hates my guts. And it's totally different than what he thought it was. And the way he handles himself, you could see what's going on. It just like jettisoned the respect and adoration I already had for him because he just handled it so well.
So how did he deal with it?
He was just very quiet and he continued on. He didn't say anything, but you just could just see him making the adjustments in his head. Like, okay.
Like he was figuring it out in real time.
He was figuring it out. And then he just continued on. He didn't change his line of thinking, but it was like a singularly fantastic moment in documentary filmmaking to see his reaction to that, but also the dignity and the self-respect with which he carried himself, and he was just going to continue on the way we see Trump do. Like, for all his flaws, and I mean, he has a ton, that he keeps on keeping on, I think is a really big deal and does show a lot of courage.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Do you know about this Hopi prophecy with the man in the red hat? Do you know about this?
No.
Let me cue this up. This is really interesting. Let me see if I can get this here to the point where it's, I want to get to what this guy says. Okay. All right. So let me set the stage. There's a film, I think it's from like the 1950s, and there's this Hopi elder, and he's talking about this prophecy of the future. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with the man in the red hat.
Okay.
So I'm gonna play this in its entirety, and then I'm gonna toss it back to you and get your thoughts on it. Okay.
Cool.
All right.
By suggesting an invasion or sudden appearance of a dominant.
Hold on. I don't want to get past this part.
Fair use.
Hold on. Here we go. Right here. I'm going to get right here. Right. Hold on. Right here.
All right. 22.
How are they going to do it? So they explained to me, we have a gourd rattle that we still use in our ceremony. And that gourd rattle represents the world. On one side, this figure is on the drawing. And another one is on this side. That'll be a gourd rattle. We still use them. The one old man told me, take a look. Whoever has this symbol in this world is going to shake us up 2 times. And it just came to me quickly. And I wondered, what nation ever shown something similar to this one? Because they will be very intelligent people. They're going to produce many inventions of all types. They're going to be so powerful that they're going to use that to shake us up real hard. And they're going to almost destroy themselves. But later, out of it, a new generation is going to rise. This time, they will know what to do in the right manner, for the right purpose. Then around it, there's a sun symbol. Those people are very intelligent people that have that symbol. They have produced many things, invent many things, and they become powerful. And they also shake us up 2 times. Second time, with the help of another. These 2 have shook us up 2 times real hard, warning us. And they almost destroy themselves. But out of it, a new generation is coming, stronger, much better equipment, everything, powerful things going to be developed by these 2 people. Then the third one that will finally bring about purification of this land in this continent would be a man with red cap, red hat, or red cloak. Now, we do not know who that nation is or what people, but they say those people will have a large population, and they will also have much scientific inventions of all types. Very powerful nation going to be. So once he starts moving, these others 2 will join him with all their power and might. The 3 of them going to come here quickly together, and nothing can stop them. This time they're going to come right here. They say even they're going to come here so fast, they come here for breakfast. Now this is nice, clear day today, calm, everything, nice. Tomorrow morning, maybe we get up at breakfast time, then the whole sky will be darkened. Old man said, I don't know what will cause it darkening of the sky. Then he said the people will be raining from the sky. And in one day, they're going to get control of this whole continent. And they're going to cut us up into 4 sections. And they're going to look for a leader that still remains, a native leader, still remaining to the spiritual path. And to him, they will gather people here to him. And they will say, now these people, I gave them the religion and the duty to produce things, to invent things, and to become powerful people. When they came here, what have they been doing to you? Now, suppose he was the last chief still remaining in this area. They will ask him, and they will say, well, those people have destroyed my people. They have taken care of and taken everything from my people, land, rivers, and hunting rights, and everything that I used. They just took it away from me against my opposition. Then those that have done that, what we call purification, would be the real wicked people. People have taken advantage of them in that manner. These figures had no heads on them. That will be their supreme punishment. Because right in daylight, right in public, they're going to weed out those bad people and they're going to chop their heads off, they said. And that is what they said will happen. That's first punishment. Then they say, what about these people here? And he will look at them and said, well, at least they make an attempt to help us. They did try to do something to help us, protect us. And they will pull out all those people. They will know you can't get away. They said they'll have some means of catching you. And they will bring those people. There'll be a lot of those people. Then they will say, look, you have disturbed this land, life, these people. You have polluted their rivers and land and everything. Now you go and clean it up. And whoever survives out of that will be able to stay with the leader here. Then they say, what about these people? These people have really suffered, been persecuted and laughed at. They've been punished and they've been beat up also because they really stood by me. And they will pull out those people and they will be brought to him and they will be respected. That is what they say will happen at this period by the people that has this symbol and man with red cap and red cloak. They will come from each direction, from sun, where the sun rises. And they will come here quickly. And they will have something to paralyze all man-made machinery. Everything come to a standstill. All power will go out. All man-made machinery will come to a standstill. And we will be helpless. Then they just come and take it over. And this is what they will happen to by those people that are coming from each direction. Now, if those people are commissioned by the Great Spirit to do that for the Great Spirit, if we can't clean it ourselves here, and if they fail, then the Great Spirit said there are another people coming from west direction. They'll be coming here for a long time. They're just taking this time slowly. They're coming and building up more power, more people, more invention, and all that. And they just kept coming. If these people doesn't come here to purify this for the Great Spirit, then this one will come. And they said, when that happens, don't get them on the housetop and watch, because those people are coming from the west direction. There'll be millions of people coming up on the west coast, like ants crawling up on the land. And they will have no mercy for anyone. They'll be very cruel and severe. They're not going to ask questions. They're just going to whip everything as they come. They're going looking for someone that will hold on to the spiritual path here. They're going to do that. This is what they said is going to happen. With these two purifiers on both sides are coming to this continent here where we started from, and we came back. We just about to destroy ourselves, mess it up. We can't straighten ourselves up. Then these purifiers will have to do it. This is what they said will happen here. So whoever comes out, then we will meet the Great Spirit. But if not, if no one listens, then these elders, religious men, will go down into the kiva, go through a ceremony. Then they go over a prayer to 4 corners of this earth, to the above and to the below, and said, all right, none of these, my children, my people have listened to me or helped me. Now you take over.
The age of purification, the Hopi prophecy.
All right. So let me get your raw reaction on that.
There was a lot. I mean, I saw the one symbol is the Templars, the other symbol is the swastika, but the swastika has been co-opted. So are we talking about the original spiritual swastika, the Nazi swastika?
I think so if you look at the sun as well, right? So the Germans and the Nazis were black sun worshipers, right? They were into the black sun. So and on the other side, that is also the Iron Cross from World War One, which was the symbol, right? So you have both symbols of Germany on both sides of that mural. So I think what he's saying is that the Germans who created the big shakeup and nearly killed themselves, I think he's referring to them as having gone into like Antarctica or New Schwabenland, and they have all this technology, right?
Yep.
And I think what he's saying is that they are going to come back and that they are going to partner with the man in the red cap, who is Donald Trump.
Right.
And he said that this would be an unstoppable force. Now, what's interesting...
Force of good or force of bad?
Well, I think he's saying a force of good. Because these people will turn off all the power immediately to get everybody's attention. So this gets back to your kind of right use of will thing. Like who are these people? Why are they here? And what is their role? So the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to exact justice on the people that fucked the place up. Right? And he basically said they're going to get their heads cut off. And it will be public. And what's interesting, this gets back into Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon got banned from YouTube in 2020. And he said, what we need to do is we need to have, he's talking metaphorically speaking, of course, Fauci's head on a pike outside the White House.
I hope that's not a metaphor.
Right. In his defense with YouTube. No, I agree with you. But so it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, so who's really fucked up the land? Well, people like Bill Gates and, a lot of people who have, turned this place into, a GMO nightmare. Right. So that's part of it. And then the interesting part.
Well, to your point, in the past week, and Emily and I talked about this on our show this week, we heard Brett Weinstein, Elon Musk, and Amaryllis Fox all talking about the incoming EMP. They're all on the same team. So it was like, okay, that they seem to be seeding the narrative that that's coming in terms of everything going off and dark in an instant.
So here's where I think it gets interesting in terms of the linearity of the narrative. At the end, it's obvious he's talking about the Chinese.
So I couldn't tell if that was the Chinese or this border invasion that we've had over the past few years, because that was also coming through the West Coast.
Well, it's also coming from the South as well, through Texas.
Right.
I think he's talking about the Chinese, millions like ants, right? And he said that they're already there and they're already building up their inventions and their technology.
Right.
And so I think that so again, in terms of the linearity of the narrative, it's like, okay, so they're there, but then they arrive on the West Coast.
Right.
And then they just have millions and millions of people and they start this invasion. And it's like, okay, where in that narrative is there this space and time for the people to redeem the land and the environment?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are we in that picture? Okay, so let's look at who is going to be a part of the Trump cabinet. It's RFK.
I really
Right.
don't like that.
RFK's in there. Whatever you think about him, like, he's not going to be into, he wants to make America healthy again. So maybe it's a superficial choice on Trump's part. Actually, I think Thomas Massey's way better. Way better. Way. By the way, let's just have a quick conversation about Massey, and we'll return to that. Thomas Massey has accrued an enormous amount of political capital in the last year. Enormous.
Yeah, at great cost.
At great cost. Well, that's one of the reasons why he's acquired it, because he's lost his wife.
Yeah.
Right. And Massey has come out and said, yeah, we got to get a real dual citizens in the government.
Get them all out. All of them.
Trump.
At least Trump's pro-Israel and all this.
Right. So Trump has got an interesting dilemma on his hands with Massey. And he's got to figure out a way to work with Massey. Because Massey, again, he's accrued a lot of political capital. But then Trump also has Miriam Adelson and, all the Israeli money behind him. But I think that, and this is where Massey really comes into the story, that we do have to reclaim our food and our land and our water. And the way that the elder was talking about this, it almost felt like, okay, here's a bunch of you, and you're going to be given shovels and hose and whatever, and you're going to have to work on this to clear it up. And if you don't clear it up, you're fucked, right? And I'm not sure if it's that literal, but it feels like we're kind of in that time where we have to do this because it's been so compromised.
Agreed. But my fear with Trump and the people who he has around them is they're all techno-fascists. And that's moving us farther and farther away from caring for the land and getting back to the land.
Well, again, that's why I think Massey is really important.
Yeah. Do you think he will get a place in Trump's cabinet?
If Trump was smart, yes, absolutely. And the other person that I would find a place for in Trump's cabinet is Nicole Shanahan.
Oh, God, no.
I like her. I like her. Don't you think that she has turned a bit of a page?
No, I cannot stand her. She's so first of all, I don't respect women who are gold diggers. And that's all her power. Her whole thing is this IVF, talk about the privilege conversation that your biggest thing is getting women in their 40s pregnant. All those resources could go into feeding the world, clothing the world. I'm sorry, if you're 48 and it didn't happen, it didn't happen. Get over it. And she's all about tech. Just like RFK with his vantage point capital nonsense. No, I don't like her at all. Not to mention how close she is to Dustin Moskowitz and open philanthropy, which everyone loves to evade and pretend like that's enough. I do not trust her at all. At all. I don't trust her. I don't like her.
So my historical knowledge of her positions is not as informed as yours is. But if that's what she's about in the IVF thing, I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Pull up her site. If you pull up her nonprofit with the billions that she made by fucking the Google guy and then trashing him publicly, which is disgusting because he's the father of her child. Have some
That's
dignity.
bad. That's bad. That's bad. You shouldn't do that.
Gross. and selling them down the river. And her whole nonprofit is about like tech, blockchain, and getting middle-aged ladies pregnant.
Okay. She doesn't get a seat at the table then.
No.
All right. No seat at the table for Nicole Shanahan.
It goes back to these whores of Babylon who
so she's like a more digestible Kamala Harris is what you're saying.
Yes. And what I will give Nicole Shanahan credit for is she's well-spoken and she comes off way better than Kamala. But once again, she's only in that position because she got knocked up by a rich guy at Burning Man.
Right. I wanted to go back to this video just for a second because there was a part of it that I thought was very interesting that I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to use a
any
visual.
time with that like Maltese cross symbol, and as like, is that in conflict with the Nazis? Like, that's where I got confused. I'm like, aren't we talking about the same like dark agendas?
Well, so I don't think these people know anything about it. They don't know anything. They're just going on pure symbol.
Right.
And so here, let me show this just for a second. Let me go back here. This is what really got my attention with this video is this symbol right here.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, is that the four corners itself? Like, what are you seeing in that?
Well, so I'll show you in a second. So it's just remember that symbol. Okay. All right, let me bring this up.
It's very similar to the symbol I have on my bracelet. I was just checking.
And I've talked about this before. At least I can get a good picture of it. Hold on. Here, let me just show it to you. I'll just do it like this. If you look at the two eclipses from 2017 to 2024, what do you get? You get America cut into four pieces, four corners, right?
Yep.
This is exactly what happened.
So you're seeing that symbol as the two eclipses?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And that now whether or not the population is apportioned based on those areas, I don't know. Right? Like one group is, put on the streets and decapitated. Another group gets to rest and recuperate because they've been downtrodden. Another group who helped, support them and has taken a lot of abuse. I guess maybe they're a part of that group as well. And then the other group, which is, you guys really didn't do enough, so you got to work harder to redeem the land, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's all apportioned by this, right? But mm-hmm. It struck me when I saw that's what it reminded me of. It reminded me of how the country was cut into four corners during the eclipses. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, is that one of the things that started during Trump, if you go back to that first eclipse, which happens in 2017, literally it almost like matches the Mason-Dixon line. It's a little high in the north, but it literally cuts the country in two. Mm-hmm. And we start to become really polarized and get into all the, left-right paradigm shit.
Right.
Right. And then you come in, you have this other quartering that takes place. And one of the things that I've had discussions with people about with Trump is the Balkanization of the United States, mm-hmm. and how we're literally being broken up into these ideological chunks,
Right.
Right. And that is also very much a part of not just the eclipses, right? But even that four-cornered cross section. And I don't think that I'd like to think that I'm wrong on this, but I think that's going to continue to happen. When
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, when you have Gavin Newsom like doubling down and saying, "Oh, we're going to remain a sanctuary state and fuck you," right? It just feels like
unless Trump puts him in prison or hangs him for treason. Like if we have serious justice,
I agree.
It could be restored. Like I think that's the upside to this election is there's a window of hope. Whether we'll take advantage of that, whether we'll capitalize upon that opportunity, it's the upside of Bobby Kennedy. I don't trust him because he's a climate communist and an Israel whore and a liar and a sociopath, but he is well-spoken. He does have leadership qualities. And bringing that type of energy into the cabinet could truly help unify, because Trump on his own is not going to do it. He doesn't have those skills. But I do think we have an opportunity to shift this.
So here's a question. How do you go the Steve Bannon route, which by the way, I'm also in favor of.
Yeah.
Right. How do you go the Steve Bannon route and at the same time promote unity? This is a really interesting paradox.
Wait, so was the question, how do you go the Steve Bannon route and promote unity and not promote unity?
No, and promote unity.
So I think because this is the beauty of law, not legality, but law. Like human rights were violated. Laws were broken. Even people who bought into it were injured, lost family, lost businesses. So regardless of like our opinions or our mind control, showing up for justice because of the large scale wrongs done is a service to the American people. And if it's framed properly, like because we've all been fucked over by the ideological nonsense, by FOVID, by the border invasion, all of those things. If it's framed in the right way, it's not of its own accord counter to unity. Again, we're just dealing with people's broken brains.
So, are you a tarot person?
Yes.
Let's take a look at the Justice card. It's a very interesting card. And this is just some bullet points here. Justice, zodiacal sign Libra, Kabbalistic letter, Lamed. It is connected to the tiger's eye and the crystal cinnabar. Truth, natural law, righted wrongs.
That's to all beings.
That's right.
That's not partisan.
That's right. Truth, natural law, righted wrongs. It is the 11th card in the deck. It's represented by Libra. And Mario from Symbolic Studies did a great presentation on Libra and the pillars, and then the center of the pillar, which is the fulcrum for the two scales, right? And a whole dive into sort of this polar cosmology. Here's another: commitments, contracts, court cases, equality, getting what you deserve, law and order. So this is the card of our time right here, the Justice card. And
I keep thinking of this in terms of like child rearing. And the parents who just let their children do whatever they want without any discipline or rules or boundaries, and how that really does a disservice to those children. And in reality, children want rules. They want authorities who they can trust. They want limitations to know that they're safe. And that's where I think we've gone awry. But it's like natural law and getting what we deserve is in service to everyone's best interest. It's not counter to people's best interests. It's reframing that. Like, we need justice restored for all of us, not for just half of us.
I agree. Here's another little interesting connection to this card. The demographic that really pushed Trump over the finish line is Gen X.
Mm-hmm.
Gen X astrologically has Pluto in Libra.
Yep.
And Libra, of course, is the scales of justice.
Yeah.
I think this is such a fascinating development for Gen X. And finally, their voices are being heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, they've been drowned out by the, look, I know there are millennials that watch this show, and there's some millennials that are real beautiful souls. And the reason they're beautiful is because they've gone through some very intense and deep shadow work, right? Which is all about Pluto and Scorpio. Like those are the best of breed millennials, because they have faced like some very dark issues in their lives, and they've come through the other side, and they can be incredibly impactful and very truthful, right? But the millennials that we got used to are the ones that screamed and cried the loudest, right? And then the millennials coming through the university system, and then the flip to DEI and ESG and all of the sort of fake equity bullshit. Like, they were the ones that were able to take advantage of that very quickly. So they're getting hired very quickly by Salesforce and Google and all these companies. So they get a seat at the table really fast. Right. And then on the other side, you have the boomers, who were the parents of Gen X. And, they got a seat at the table a long time ago. And so to me, Gen X is kind of like the new silent majority in some ways, right? And they made their voices heard quite loudly in this election. And if you look at the people who influence, whether you like them or not, right? Whether you like Tucker Carlson or not, he's Gen X. Whether you like Russell Brand or not, he's Gen X. Jason Whitlock is Gen X. So you had all of these people, who were born sometime between like 1965 and, like 1980. Like Joe Rogan is Gen X. Totally. Like, these are the people, even Elon Musk is Gen X. Okay. He's Gen X. Again, whatever you think of him, like, this was the election that Gen X stepped up and carried the ball across the finish line. And oh, by the way, the Justice card is ruled by Libra.
Do you follow Justine Bateman on Twitter?
Is Jason Bateman's sister?
Yes.
I do not. Is she a worthwhile follow?
Yes, she is. Because as you're speaking, I feel like she's the quintessential example of this. Because she was the Gen X it girl in the 80s, right? Yeah. She was like peak fame, peak hottie. And so she's been like quietly on the sidelines, speaking out against ageism, speaking out against the traps of fame. And Trump won, and she started a new series, which is all on Twitter, where she is evaluating videos on social media of liberals freaking out about Trump winning. And she's just critiquing the camera angles and the directing. And it's really smart and creative, because she's making fun of it, but not directly. And she posted today, she's like, I'm really tired of having had to spend the last 4 years in the shadows. And I feel like she's the perfect example of Gen X is finally claiming her truth, right? She never came out politically before for all these years, but now she is. And I feel like it's just what you're talking to. Like Gen X has been kind of dropping the ball the whole time. We've all been like the slackers on the sideline, but it feels like now's the time where we're like, no, we're actually going to have an impact.
Well, it's clear that this generation has had an impact.
Yeah.
Because they came out in force. I think they were responsible for what, like 45% of the vote or something like that. It was a pretty significant number. And, so for me, generationally, I kind of identify more with Gen X than I do with the boomers. Mm-hmm. Even though I was born in 1960, I was an early latchkey kid. So I relate to a lot of Gen X stuff, and I came of age in the 70s and not in the 60s. So a lot of boomers came of age in the 60s. So I relate to them. And the thing that I love, and I talked about this before, is that Gen X is kind of the last outpost of the things that we were talking about earlier, like individuality.
Yeah.
And being free range and, going everywhere on your bikes and sort of learning how to take care of yourself, right? In some ways.
Whiny babies.
Right. So they bring that to the table. Plus, they bring some historical resonance from the past with them. Right. So when you get into talking with millennials, not all millennials, you'll bring up a reference with something and they'll go, what? I mean, what are you talking about? Who is that? I don't know who this person is. Right. Mm-hmm. But if you have that conversation with somebody who's Gen X, more than likely they will know who that person is. Mm-hmm. Or they'll say, oh, I've heard of that person. Tell me more about him. Right. So they're the last Gen X. And just like the seventh house in Libra, right? That's where Gen X is. And they're like the outpost between all the generations that came before them and then the generations that are coming after them. Pluto and Scorpio, Pluto and Sag, Pluto and Capricorn. Now we got Pluto and Aquarius, and people are having children with Pluto and Aquarius. So Gen X, this is your time.
Well, and also we're the last ones who actually have the skills and memory of living an analog life. So it feels like the next, the next piece of what we're, those of us who are aligned will want to stave off is AI, automation, digital currency, digital IDs, and Gen X, we're the last ones who know how to do it, who know how to use a Thomas guide, who it's okay if you're not in constant contact with your child every 5 freaking seconds, it's going to be okay. So if there's any hope for us not going into techno-fascist land, it's Gen X who can hold that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And, I posted over on Twitter that this was the generation that really carried the day. And I got all these replies on Twitter and, Pluto, you have to throw a little Pluto and Virgo in there too, because there are people that are born in 64 and 65, 66 who all have Pluto and Virgo. And some of them are Gen X people, like just by their cultural generational sort of development.
Right.
And they were all incredibly proud, right? They were just like happy to say, this is my generation. This is who I'm a part of. Like, this is my group. And I just thought it was great. And I've always loved Gen X. I astrologically, I just think that their outer planets are really interesting. Mm-hmm. And, millennials are so extreme. And just astrologically, they're so extreme. Mm-hmm. But if they go through that black mirror, that Pluto and Scorpio, they can be not only highly functional, but they can get shit done. Mm-hmm. And they can be very deeply transformative. The challenge is to get through that and not point the finger at other people and say, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem. We're not the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we're up against. And that was like the come to Jesus moment I had a couple weeks ago, because I'm surrounded by Harris Waltz signs here in Santa Fe, and I was letting it get to me. I was letting myself get triggered. I was letting myself judge, the stupid Tesla in front of me with the Harris Waltz sticker. And then I realized, like, then I'm buying into the programming and I'm part of the problem. And I really need to get my head out of my ass and find my way back to neutral. And so I just keep looking at, just like the woman who went off on me in the locker room, it's like, I'm going to take the high road. Like, I'm going to take responsibility. Maybe I was rude to her and I don't remember. So I'm going to inquire to know what that is, to see if I need to make an adjustment. That's where, for me, what I'm being called to do right now, so that I'm not contributing to that low vibe, divisive bullshit that's been overtaking our culture for the past decade.
So my Scorpio rising, the minute you brought that story up and started talking about it, and I realized that you're in the shower with her and she's going off on you, you know where my head went? My head went, excuse me, would you be saying the same thing that you're saying to me right now if I had a dick? That would have shut her right the fuck up, right? But it's better that you took the high road.
I just feel like right now, like, especially living in such a liberal town where tensions are so high, I don't want to give anyone a reason to have an issue with me.
No, I think it's smart. I know it's cliche, but it's, it's like, be the change, right? Be the change that, you want to envision.
It's cliche, but it's true,
Yeah, it is true.
It is.
We only have about 15 minutes left here, but I got to talk about Tim Waltz.
Okay.
What a fucking disaster. What a disaster. What were they thinking when they picked this man?
The whole ticket. I don't get it. What are his, let's pretend that you and I were both Democrats as a thought experiment, and we're so excited for Harris to win. What are the upsides to choosing Waltz? Like, where is that a good idea?
Oh, well, we'll take Minnesota. Well, you're going to take fucking Minnesota anyway. Like, you don't need Tim Waltz to take Minnesota. So let's just take that out of the equation. Oh, he's a dude. Oh, he was a football coach. Yeah. Oh, he was real pro-justice with George Floyd. Like, none of those things really matter. In fact, he had so much more baggage than any kind of, political social equity that whatever that shit was anyway. Terrible choice. But I think that's what they were thinking. It's like, would Josh Shapiro would have been a better choice? Absolutely. He governs Pennsylvania, right? Big state. You're already going to get Minnesota. The problem, they boxed themselves into a corner around Israel. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, well, you've got Josh Shapiro, very pro-Israel governor, and he's your running mate. We can't have that.
Right.
There's
too much Jew.
It's too much, right? Too much. Although strategically, it probably would have been a better choice. Mm-hmm. Apparently, Obama wanted this guy, Mark Kelly from Arizona, the former astronaut, Gabby Gifford's husband. Yeah, maybe that's a better choice. I don't know. Does it move the needle? Maybe they get Arizona. But again, ideologically, they really box themselves into a corner.
It feels like it's the perfect definition of why DEI wokeness and ideology doesn't work. I can only imagine that, like, all of her staff and everyone were DEI hires because of their disabilities, their vaginas, their sexual preferences, and therefore there was no political intelligence whatsoever. That's the only way I can rationalize what happened over there.
Well, let me throw this out to you. Let me get your thoughts on this. Do you think if they had found somebody more competent than Tim Waltz, they feared that it would have shown up Harris?
Yes, 100%. Which is also why I feel like, well, no. I mean, I feel like it's why Trump didn't go with a Tulsi or a Candace, because he didn't want to be with a strong woman.
But he didn't want to go with Candace because Candace is vehemently anti-Israel.
Correct.
And basically did a fucking octagon takedown of Rabbi Shmuley, which was beautiful. I loved watching that.
Yeah, totally.
Loved it. He lost his shit. Candace Owens is very surprising.
It's interesting what's happening with her because they're clearly like setting her up to be the new conspiracy theorist, the new Alex Jones, the one who's going to move the Overton window, like
Right.
to widen it for conspiracy. But then when they say we're going to need to pull back on free speech, she'll be right there to do it. But she's gained, the trust of some conspiracy theorists, so maybe they'll go along with it. Rabbi Shmuley, I feel like he is himself an anti-Semitic psyop because he's such a poor, disgusting representation of Jews and Jewishness. He's like the worst of all the caricatures, of like the Elders of Zion, like the worst of the like Nazi propaganda cartoons. That's Rabbi Shmuley. So the fact that they even let him out into the public sphere seems to be to give Jews a bad name.
Yeah, I mean, but also like fundamentally, but like wasn't his father also a rabbi as well, right? I think his father might have been a rabbi, but there's also this connection with this is a whole other show, but with like Schneerson, right? Like Rebbe Schneerson, and RFK Senior with Rebbe Schneerson, and Shmuley is kind of like the descendant, although he's really not. But like this is a whole other just fucking jungle that you have to take a machete to get through,
right?
And this weird allegiance to Chabad, and that runs through RFK and it runs through Trump. And
I don't want to cut the conversation short, but I am curious to know why you think Shanahan would be a positive addition to the cabinet.
Well, you've probably changed my mind on it already, so I'm not really going to. I mean, I just thought when I saw her with Thomas Massey that they had a really high level conversation about food and agriculture, and I thought to myself, this is really interesting that these two people who are from vastly different worlds, although Thomas Massey does have a tech background, are having a really high level conversation where the two of them are kind of sparking and elevating each other's thoughts. And that's why I thought she would be good. But, I'm always open to, reevaluating. I didn't like her at first, by the way. I was not into her. I thought, oh, RFK is shacking up with the rich chick so he can, fund his campaign, right? Like I just thought it was like really calculated and just transparent. Like I didn't like it, and when I first heard her talk, she didn't impress me. Like she just did not impress me when I first heard her talk. But that conversation with Massey was interesting, and Nicole Shanahan's a Libra, so she's better when she's with other people. And if she shares the same kind of ideological or philosophical or political pitch with that person, it's almost like she twins with them and bonds with them.
Right.
And so that was what turned me a little bit with her, was that conversation. Everything before that I was not into.
But I'm wondering where, like, we as a culture have decided to make the leap that, like, someone who's good at having a podcast conversation, that translates to political leadership. Even with Elon, even with RFK, they have zero political experience whatsoever. It concerns me that these are the people who he's choosing to put in his cabinet, except people who actually have experience in the field, minus Massey, who I hope makes it.
All right, so let's go through that. I think it's a really good question. The people that have political experience in the field, if you're pulling from the Republican talent pool, it's not great.
Ted
right?
Cruz?
Who?
Cruz?
Cruz. I don't know about Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz belongs to these charismatic Catholics, right? And Ted is okay. I mean, he'd be called Josh Hawley. He's a hardcore Zionist sympathizer.
Okay.
Those
are okay.
I know. But we're talking to Republicans.
Right.
Josh Hawley is really sharp. You won't find a speck of dirt on Josh Hawley, by the way. Not one. Josh Hawley's the type of guy who knew that he was going to be in politics, and he lived his life accordingly. Good luck finding any dirt on Josh Hawley. It's not there.
Right.
Ted Cruz, he's okay. He doesn't really inspire a lot in my brain.
What about Florida guy? He's pretty badass.
Who, DeSantis?
Yeah.
He's okay. He can be governor of Florida. And again, he let Israel set up a fucking base in Tampa, right? So CENTCOM, Israel's a part of CENTCOM. So we actually have the base of a foreign government inside this country.
Finding people who aren't connected to Israel in our government
very hard.
Tiny.
It's almost impossible.
Exactly.
It's almost, but getting back to the Republican talent, I mean, it almost feels like you have to have outsiders in some ways, but they have to be qualified outsiders. You just can't have, I think Steve Bannon's a qualified outsider.
100%.
And the problem in 2016 is that Jared Kushner got Steve Bannon booted out of the White House.
Right.
And that was one of the biggest mistakes Trump made.
Totally.
Was allowing his little sycophantic son-in-law, determine policy. My moniker for Jared Kushner is he's like herpes, and the Republicans can't get rid of him. Right?
Yeah.
So Bannon's one of those outsiders that I think makes sense, right?
Totally.
Tulsi Gabbard, an outsider, right? Does she have the political clout, wherewithal to bring something to the table? That's open for discussion.
Well,
so I feel
experience in government.
She does have experience. Yeah, she does. She has some experience. So I think you have to, and it's a very narrow, very, very narrow kind of pool. Rand Paul, although Rand's got his issues as well, would probably fit that description.
That would be a dream to get Rand Paul in.
But you can't take Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, right? Because they're both part of the same state, right? You can't do that.
Got it.
So you have to take one or the other.
Right.
But I do think outsiders with some political experience would help for sure. He was surrounded by swamp creatures last time.
He chooses the worst people, and that's my concern right now. Is he's got all these techno-fascist Santa Fe Institute people. It feels like a lot of wolves are circling him. Candace pointed it out in her Alex Jones interview. I'm concerned that Trump isn't getting it and doesn't understand what they're there to pull off.
My feeling about first-term Trump is that he had an incredible amount of debt to pay back, right?
Right.
And so, for instance, Wilbur Ross, who is an attaché of the Rothschilds, bailed Trump out financially when Trump was having a very hard time with the casinos. What happens? Wilbur Ross gets appointed to the cabinet. That's a political payback. Sheldon Adelson sunk huge amounts of money into Trump's presidency. Who do you think was making a lot of those appointments? Sheldon Adelson and the people around Sheldon Adelson. Do you think Trump really wanted to take John Bolton? No, he didn't want John Bolton.
But that's the other thing, is that politics is compromise, so everyone who's upset about warp speed, I feel like they're missing the compromise piece. I get what you're saying. Now that he's not worried about a second term, maybe he will go balls to the wall. I'd love to see him rescind the Patriot Act, rescind Smith Modernization Act. Why didn't he pardon Assange?
When he was president?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer to that.
Do you have a theory?
Do I have a theory? This is about the only thing that I can kind of surmount in my brain. is that with Ivanka and Jared Kushner in the White House, and also his other children outside of the White House, that Trump was being threatened by completely eliminating all of his generational wealth, and that he was going to have to dance to a tune, right? I would think that over the last 4 years that Trump has, if he's smart, he would have firewalled all that stuff, right? He would have sat down with Musk or whomever and said, we need to move these assets into Bitcoin, right? And we'll protect Bitcoin, and we'll make sure that we're untouchable, we're bulletproof. That's the only thing that I can think of, and even that is a bit of a stretch,
right?
So I don't know, maybe. So here's going to be the litmus, right? Like day fucking one, if he makes it from here to there, he's got to pardon every single J6 person, every one of them, for sure, right? Every single one of them.
Yeah, and hang Fauci publicly.
Oh, I have no problem with that. And Trump doesn't apologize very much, if at all. But I think it would be good for him to address the Assange situation. Yeah. It would be good. And I'm not the hugest Julian Assange fan, but just on principle, I think it would be, invite him to the White House, sit down and have a photo op and shake his hand, and he could say, look, I was wrong about this man, right? I was wrong about him, and it would go a long ways for political capital. But to get to your, I do want to talk about Operation Warp Speed, since you brought it up. And it's such a complicated issue for a lot of people to wrap their heads around. And I've spent a lot of time going back and tracking all those events. And there was a period where Trump, at least publicly, was on the record of, hey, this is just a flu, right? Give us a few weeks, get some sunshine and air, and we'll be fine. Yep. He actually brings up hydroxychloroquine. He fucking brings up hydroxychloroquine. Yep. He's talking about MMS, right? Right. He's talking about these things. Right. And he's being made fun of by the press. Like, and then there's the moment where Mike Pompeo says it's a drill that went live, and under his breath he says, I wish you would have told me. Right? Like, he says that, and I don't think he's acting. It's off the cuff. So I feel like Trump has this thing. He's got to deal with it. He's trying his best to keep a handle on it and not make it bigger than it needs to be. He lets the states kind of run their own program, for better or worse. Yep. Right? And then he says, okay, we're going to go into overdrive and we're going to do this Operation Warp Speed, and we're going to. Now, I'm going to be very Libran here, because on the one hand, he's very good friends with Woody Johnson of Johnson & Johnson. So what does Johnson & Johnson do? They have their own version of the vaccine. Yep. Right. So there's that. Right. So for Trump, it is not just a political move, but it's a personal move. Right. Now, the J&J vaccine was not an mRNA vaccine. it had its own issues. It was not a great vaccine. In fact, they had to take it off the market, right?
Everyone I know who got that one has chronic inflammation issues at this point.
Yeah. So
that seems to be like
let's not put it, cast it in a reasonable alternative category, right? So now he's forced with having to deal with all these people who are clamoring to shut the country down,
right,
for an extended period of time. What the critics of Operation Warp Speed don't understand is that every single country in the world had a universal response to this. And we're doing the exact same fucking thing.
Exactly.
Right. So Trump pushes the pedal to the metal, and all of a sudden they have.
But I don't even believe that he pushed the pedal to the metal.
Well, this is the narrative. It's already in motion, right? But what he does is he speeds up the timeline. He speeds the timeline up. And I think both you and I would agree that somewhere in the batches of whatever these vaccines were, probably about 30 to 40% were saline.
Right.
Because number one, you need to have variables inside of any kind of experiment. And this is an experiment.
Right.
And the other part is, could they really have cranked out that many doses that quickly?
Right.
The answer to that is no.
Right.
Right. So now we have this thing that's happening. And here's the other part. People had a fucking choice.
Exactly. And he never, ever wavered on choice.
That's right.
Ever.
Yeah. People had a choice. So you could blame Trump and you can blame Operation Warp Speed, but at the end of the day, you had a choice.
Exactly.
And you could have taken it or not taken it. Right?
Yep.
And they're like, oh, well, people were pressured. I don't give a fuck.
Right. Where's your moral
I don't
compass?
give a fuck. That's
what
right.
What are your priorities?
Exactly.
Your own safety or your paycheck? That's on
right.
you.
Right. Or, oh, I got so much pressure from my family. Okay.
Right.
What other areas of your life are you getting pressure from your family from?
Right.
So, and this is the thing that I bring up with people like Derek Bros and Whitney Webb and all these people who just love to just demonize this and the guy at High Impact Flicks. And it's like, dude, at the end of the day, you had a choice.
Right. Right. When I brought it up with Whitney Webb, she unfriended me.
Oh, man. So there was a period about 2 months ago. I went on hard on these black pill people. I just, it's like, yeah, Whitney, you're a really good journalist. Stop being a fucking activist.
Right. That is the whole, get your personal opinions out of it.
Stop being an activist. You know why? Because Whitney, you got no fucking solutions.
That's the whole issue. It's like, great, you're tearing everything down, but what are you putting up in the meantime? And I've said this publicly before, but when we were working on Plandemic 2, Trump called Mickey to thank him and asked to fly him to the White House, but we were working on the project, so that didn't happen. So if Trump was really pro-vax, then why would he have done that? That wasn't a publicity stunt. No one knew about it.
What's funny is I did an interview with Mickey, and he said he just flown back from Washington, D.C.
When was that?
2020.
Okay, so that might have been when we'd finished, and Trump flew him out.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's my problem with Whitney. Great journalist, get out of the activism business. Also, I also feel like Whitney has a lot of unresolved issues around her father that she projects onto Donald Trump.
Right.
Because do you know about her father at all?
No. Would you please catch me up?
Her father's rich. He's a Republican. He lives in Florida. And she doesn't dig him. Right. Like, who fits that profile?
Well,
rich Republican, lives in Florida.
That's the issue with every activist, every journalist, every podcaster, you and me combined, is we all have our own personal shit and we all have our blind spots. All of us, And it's just being honest about it. And what I see with Whitney, and I totally respect her work, is she's not open when alternate information comes into the space. She's very rigid in what she's decided.
She's a millennial. Whitney Webb is a millennial.
Mm-hmm.
And she hasn't gone through the fire, right? She's got her nice little enclave in Chile.
Right.
And she's, you know, she's not even in the country.
Right.
Like put yourself through the fire. Come live here.
Right.
You know, if you're going to be a social critic, you know, I don't really like Derek Bros, but at least Derek Bros lives here half the time. And at least Derek Bros like ran for, you know, mayor of Houston and has been on the forefront of the anti-fluoride movement, right? At least Derek Bros has written a manual about, you know, creating your own kind of world. You know, I respect Derek for that. I don't really like Derek because he takes himself way too seriously and doesn't have a sense of humor, right? But at least he has a little skin in the game. And so
consistent. He's consistently had skin in the game for years and years and
yes,
years.
Yeah. And he and I have gone back and forth on Twitter a lot, right? Mm-hmm. But again, somebody like James Corbett doesn't even live here, right?
Right. It's so easy to criticize when you're not here and you have no skin. And again, it's like it's that very scorched earth. Like I see it in, you know, the virus, no virus conversations where it's like, okay, that's great. You've proven that viruses don't exist, but then where does disease come from? Like, I don't see the alternatives. It's very like slash and burn and destroy, but I'm not seeing the alternatives put into place.
That is, again, I'm not here to hammer millennials, but Pluto and Scorpio is burn it all down.
Right.
It's burn it all down. And then, you know, then what?
Exactly. And it's like, if the goal is to burn it all down, that's beautiful. But then like, what about the rest of us? And we didn't even have the conversation about voluntarism, and I look forward to having it, you know, at some point with you, but that's kind of where I'm on the fence about it, because there are plenty of people who aren't ready for that. Right. And so what happens with them? We don't care. We just shut off our empathy and compassion for those people. You know, it's similar to me.
Yeah. And again, I it's like when you look at Whitney Webb's work, right, and her stuff, 90% of it is focused on Trump and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk and all the back channels. There was never any talk about Harris. There was never any talk about like the XRP mafia, which was totally behind Harris, right? Never any talk about any of these things. It's all about, you know, Trump, bad daddy. And now what's happened is they've created this false uniparty and everybody's just going to go to sleep and nobody's going to fight against the system. And I'm like, well, why don't you fucking sit back for a minute and just see how these things evolve? Right. And you can always retain the right to criticize and have critical thinking about what's happening. But to just automatically demonize the thing before it's ever even taken shape or gotten off the ground, I think is completely disingenuous.
I agree. And I think it's the way I've seen it, because I observe it in myself, right? Where it's like maybe a dopamine addiction, or it's like we just get so used to automatically or unconsciously tearing stuff down from a jaded perspective that it becomes its own automatic unconscious habit that actually isn't always appropriate. That's why just for me, I've like kind of put the brakes on like, wait a minute, I'm just tearing everything down. Let me see where I can slow my roll and see things from different perspectives. And I think, you know, it's just like a neural network that's become so activated that it's just our default, and we don't realize that we're just slashing and burning and destroying and blackpilling when that might not always be the appropriate approach.
That is such a great point, because I think there was a time where that's been really needed. Like we really needed to deconstruct things. We really needed to pull back the curtain.
Right.
We needed to find out like these deep networks and internecine relationships and, you know, the dark occult magic that's behind, you know, a lot of what we're dealing with. But it also feels like there's a time where not just the time. That has diminishing returns.
Right.
And ultimately, you cannot build a world on that.
Exactly. It's like a temporary stopping point. Like it's a necessary place along the way.
Yeah.
And I'll just speak for myself. I feel like I got stuck there a little too long, and it's like 2020 was weird because it all seems so epic and so important and the stakes were so high as they were. And then just for me, like I kind of stayed there and I got stuck in that where it's like, no, it's time for something different now. We can't just keep tearing down. We have to build something.
Right. I mean, the tearing down part is okay if you have a plan.
Right.
But there's no plan.
Right.
The black pillars have no plan. So it's like, okay, come back to me with a plan.
That's kind of my thing about, the anarchists, who are just like, tear it all down. I don't believe in government. And it's like, well, that's great. What are you going to do, about the 7.9 billion people on the planet who are of a different mindset? Are they just going to starve to death? Like, where are we thinking about the well-being of the collective? Sure, this might be where we land, that this is bullshit, but we actually have to come up with something better that takes care of the greatest good, of the most of us. And not everyone is ready for no government, total chaos, whatever it is.
So this gets into some very interesting territory. And God, we could just do a whole show on this. But one of the people that I follow on Twitter, more out of entertainment purposes, is David Icke.
Mm-hmm. And I follow too.
David Icke has become the crotchety old, get off my lawn, black pill guy.
Right. I said it first. I was saying this forever ago.
Right. And what is David Icke doing to make our experience better? Nothing. And I watch his Twitter feed. And it used to be sort of like 70-30, David, you're the man, then you're the man. That's changing rapidly. Mm-hmm. And you're starting to get 50-50 on, the cult of Icke. And he's a really good barometer. But if you try to understand where he's coming from, like David Icke he's a Gnostic. Mm-hmm. So this world is completely fallen, right? It's all a lie. It's all an illusion. Everything is driven by archonic lizards, mm-hmm. And the only escape is when you fucking die, right? And then you get to move through the pleroma, and then you get to rejoin, the real creator and the real creation on the other side of the pleroma. And that ideology is it's the ideology. Who was I talking about this with? It's the ideology of cults. I was talking with Longo about this last Friday or last Sunday night. It's the ideology of cults, suicide cults. That the only way to live in this world is to leave the world, and that is at the bottom of David Icke's ideology, and it's ultimately at the bottom of the black pill ideology. Where do you go? Right?
So
Where do you go?
I interviewed David Icke in 2009.
Yeah.
And it was at a hotel. And I was sitting across from him at a table for 3 hours. And I was a David Icke fan. I was writing this for the Weekly. He didn't make eye contact with me once in a 3-hour conversation. And what I surmised from that is that there's something else running him. It felt like there was another consciousness or another soul group or something else was animating him. But I didn't really feel him there. As far as like the black pillars, I have a lot of compassion because it's this very weird moment in history of we're pulling down so many illusions, so many fictions that have been propping up this false matrix. And it's happening quite quickly. David Icke's been at it for a while, but it does feel like it's time to pivot. Like, okay, there's a wrecking crew, but something else has to be brought in. And I feel like a lot of the black pillars have gotten kind of stuck on the conveyor belt of breaking everything down and not realizing like It has to switch now. There are enough people doing that. We have to be bringing something else in at the same time.
Yeah.
Given how long his career has been built upon this breaking down of so many fictions, I have compassion. That's got to be tough. But it's weird right now that he's attacking so many people for it, when not that long ago he was preaching a very loving, unifying message, which seems to be being drowned out in this kind of competitive thing he's got going in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so contradictory. Like, he rails against Elon Musk all the time,
right,
on Twitter, and yet he uses his platform.
Right.
He uses his platform to promote his tour in Europe.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you have such a hard fucking time with him, go somewhere else. Right? Don't support his platform.
Yeah.
You know. All right, this is an aside, but it's connected to Ike. Now, I can't prove this, but somebody told me this. And they lived in New Mexico, and David Icke was in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And he was staying there, and this person was a friend of she was the friend of a friend. Her friend was where David Icke was staying at her house. And there was a moment where David Icke had his shirt off, and he had his back turned towards this person. And this person said that she saw something on his back that looked very unusual, like along his spine. Like his spine was not the spine of a typical person. That there was, it was either something artificial or something that didn't look quite human.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the only thing she said to me about this, was that there was this unusual connection to his anatomy with his spine. And like, who is David Icke really? Right. And you said that there's some kind of consciousness running him.
That was my sense. Like, obviously,
I didn't
leave, but it was, 3 hours of a one-on-one conversation, zero eye contact. It was like, it wasn't congruent with the speech that he had made the night before. Something was off, but the speech he made was very positive, and I wasn't getting a negative feeling, but I was getting the feeling like this person isn't here.
What do you think would make David Icke happy?
I think to get credit for what he started and all he's done. I do think that he wants a mass awakening. I do think that he wants, say, the dark side vanquished. But what I'm seeing now feels very egoic, that he's not getting the credit that he deserves. What do you think that he wants?
I think that's part of it. It feels like, yeah, I was talking about this 10 years ago and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, look, everybody has their time. The first time I heard David Icke, I think it was 1997 on Art Bell. I'm like, this motherfucker's speaking my language. I get him. Right? Finally, there's somebody coming through the Art Bell portal that I can really, really relate to. And I think he did a lot of really great work. Mm-hmm. A lot of really seminal work. So I think maybe the recognition might be part of it. Like, yeah, man, you're an OG. Like, you set a lot of this in motion. You switched a lot of people on. And I don't know what that looks like. Should he be given the key to some city? I don't know. But I think that the death of his daughter made him very cynical.
When did his daughter die?
I think it's going on 2 years now, or a year and a half.
How did she die?
Some kind of natural cause thing. She was young, like she was in her 40s, I think.
That'll fuck anyone up.
That's, and so I think that that's part of David's sadness. We'll put it that way, sadness.
Yeah.
So I give him a little bit of a pass because he lost a member of his family.
Yeah.
But then again, so did Thomas Massey. Right.
The way Thomas Massey is handling this is astonishing. He didn't even pause. Like, it was a week or two later, he was out continuing to rail. That is a strong character he's demonstrating.
Yeah. Yeah. And that woman was everything to him,
Yeah.
right? So they went to high school together.
Yeah.
They built a business together. They built a family together. They built a farm together. You know, it's like to lose somebody like that. I couldn't even conceive of that. Just, you know, so close. Well, let's take a look at your Amazon page.
Oh, thank you.
And that way people can see where all of Dani's books are.
I am. It actually might be ready, but I had my transformational coloring book. Yes, I am. Completely redrawn for optimal colorability. So that's going to launch in the next like week or two. I'm just waiting for Amazon to approve it and get my author copy. But that's like the new thing that's happening.
It's right there. Yes, I am.
Yes. So that's still the old one. We're waiting for them to approve.
Okay.
It'll literally be ready in the, next day or so.
Okay. So if you're interested in Dani's work, FARcast is amazing. And you want to support her, there's her Amazon page. And let's go to your website. Let me find your website so people can eyeball your website.
Thank you so much.
And you can follow Dani also on Amazon as well as her website and Instagram. Are you active on Instagram?
I am active on Instagram. I don't know how much, how shadow banned I am or how much people can see, but I do post there most days.
So there you go, DaniKatz.com. You can subscribe to her newsletter and all these other really cool things. And this is Dani's kind of a bit of a resume here. Writer for the LA Weekly, LA Times, Vice, Teen, Vogue, Santa Fe Reporter, La Yoga, Gene Key's involvement. Quite frankly, we had Frank on the other night.
Was that awesome?
Well, I love Frank.
I love Frank too.
And I did a 10-hour election night show. It was freaking epic.
Whoa.
Freaking epic. Started off at 4:00. At about 5, Frank jumped on for about a half an hour. And at 5:30, he jumped on. And then there's this young guy that lives in San Antonio.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Drake Woods. He's 17. And he's the next door neighbor of Joan's mother. So, and he has a podcast called The New Leviathan. And this kid is so smart. He is so smart. He's a conservative, right? I've had him on my show a couple times. I've been to his house, hung out with him. And so I had him on for a while. And so we had Drake on. And then, do you know Mark Malone at all? Do you know who Mark is?
Mm-mm.
Oh my God, Mark's amazing. So Mark was on for about 45 minutes. And then at 10 o'clock, David Palmer jumped on.
Awesome.
And so David and I went from 10 o'clock to about 1 a.m. And it was just freaking epic, man. The conversations, the chat was just off the hook. It was, to me, it was like one of the highlights of being a podcaster. And 10 hours, like freaking 10 hours. And it went by like that. Right. So, I would say go check it out, but it's really, really long, but it was a pretty amazing experience. So
that's awesome. I love that you did that.
Well, we did it in 2020 and it was such a nightmare in 2020. And I remember going to bed about 11:30. I'm just like, oh God, I got this bad feeling.
Yeah.
Bad feeling. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do it again. And I'm not going to bed until this thing looks like it's somewhat settled. I didn't care. It was going to be fucking 8 o'clock in the morning. I was going to stay on that stream. And luckily, by about 1 a.m, all the indicators were like, this thing is done. So I was able to shut her down.
Cool. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. And people loved it. And, I think we always have to be on guard and be vigilant. But I also feel like we have to start to build this thing, whatever this thing is.
Yeah. Agreed.
And there are some forces in this world that are diametrically opposed to what we could do. And that's what we, not just in this country, by the way.
Right.
Like, honestly, I don't know how you feel about the EU. I think they're fucking dangerous.
Agreed.
Like, the EU to me is a bigger threat than Russia.
Yeah.
Way bigger threat than Russia.
Yeah.
So that's really what we're having to go up against. And
Yeah.
a lot of the old institutionalized money, banking power, the black families, the black nobility,
Yep.
you know, all bound together, you know, under the EU, the World Economic Forum. Like, those are the forces that we have to really deal with.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, Dani, this has been great. I love you. You're one of my favorite people to have on, and I'm so glad we did this.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much for having me. I always love our conversations. I love you too, and I'm so excited for our next one.
Okay. Until then, the great Dani Katz, we're signing off here. Treat each other well, and God bless. Take care, and bye for now.